Hey there, Braves fans. Welcome back to State of the Braves. I'm your host, George McNair. Really good to be back with you guys once again. We are now into February. Yes, we're still a good ways away from the start of the regular season, but we are inching ever closer. Unfortunately, this time of year, there's not a lot of news going on, but there's a few tidbits to talk about with the Braves, and I definitely want to cover that. It is just nice to still be talking about baseball with you guys. So let's get right into it, guys. Well, the first thing I want to talk about today is the news that Chip Caray, the voice of the Braves for a number of years, is saying goodbye as he's moving on to the St. Louis Cardinals. This was a bit of shocking news. Now, Chip Caray definitely has his detractors, you could say. He's a little bit of a divisive figure, not because he's a bad guy in any way. Actually, Chip seems to be like the ultimate nice guy. But just in terms of his style of calling the game, I know a lot of people are not his biggest fan, even though he has been with the Braves since 2005. And so, if you told me Chip Caray wouldn't be with the Braves in 2023, I might think that he would have been let go, simply as they maybe are looking to get younger or just a different voice. But it wasn't that. It was Chip Caray's decision, as the St. Louis Cardinals apparently offered him that job, the play-by-play job for the Cardinals, and he took it. It is not shocking that he would take that offer. The St. Louis Cardinals, if you know anything about the Caray family, famed broadcaster Harry Caray, who is most well known for being with the Cubs, actually was with the Cardinals for many, many years before that. And Chip Caray basically grew up in the St. Louis area. So it's home for him in a lot of ways. So it does make sense that, if the Cardinals were his team growing up, probably is a dream job for him. So it's kind of cool for him that he gets this opportunity. The reason he got the opportunity is not real nice. The Cardinals play-by-play guy by the name of Dan McLaughlin, sorry if I'm butchering that, but he had multiple DUIs in the last, few months. And so Cardinals obviously had enough of that. So, just knowing that background, even though Chip Caray maybe isn't the most exciting broadcaster to ever call games, he is about as solid of an everyday guy as you could get. He's certainly not a guy who's going to get in a lot of trouble off the field, and that's what they got. So Chip Caray moves on to the Cardinals. Of course, this leaves a big opening for the Braves to fill. If you're like me and you watch a ton of Braves games, you hear obviously the play-by-play guy a whole lot, and so it affects you a lot. If the Braves bring in a really good play-by-play guy this year, it's going to actually probably make the viewing even that much better. And so I hope that will be the case. Before we go into who might be filling that position, let's talk about Chip Caray just a little bit more. Like I said, he has a lot of detractors. Chip Caray definitely over the years has frustrated me at times. He often will misread balls off the bat, thinking, a line drive is a base hit when it's like right at a guy, or, a ball is a home run when it's 20 feet short. He might not be the only guy that does that, but it seemed to happen to him quite a lot. But nonetheless, the best thing about Chip Caray was he's a good guy. I think that always came across. He was a nice guy who just seemed to get along well with whoever was in the booth. He was solid. He was there pretty much every game. He was reliable, and he was a homer. I mean, I think it used to be that the Braves broadcasters came across less like that when they were on TBS way back in the day. And that's probably because even though, they were the Braves broadcast, it was still a national broadcast. And so when it went to local, I think you see that in pretty much every area. You kind of see homers calling games. And he was that for the Braves. And I didn't mind that. I didn't mind him rooting for the Braves and still being somewhat critical sometimes. But I think he also struggled with how to do that at times too. And I think it probably needed to be, a little more critical of the Braves. So nonetheless, that's, I think Chip Caray was a solid guy in that position for a long time. But again, a lot of people are going to say, no, I couldn't stand Chip Caray. I couldn't stand how he called the game. and he definitely wore on me at times as well. I don't want to bash the guys he leaves, but just, a couple things that people had problems with Chip. He kind of constantly talked about the same things over and over again. He had kind of these pet topics. And man, when you are watching 162 games, or even if you're able to watch half the games over the course of a season, you just hear him talking about these same things over and over again, and you tune out eventually. It just gets tiring. And, being a baseball announcer might be the hardest announcing gig there is, because there's so much downtime. There's so many times where action's not happening on the field, and so you have to you kind of have to be a conversationalist. And I'm not sure that that is Chip's best quality. I think his actual play-by-play, when action is happening, he tended to be pretty good in those moments. But it was the downtime stuff, I think, that he really kind of struggled with at times. He would always talk about pitchers who couldn't throw, 95 plus. They were coming in and they were these wily veterans, this pitchability, and he always loved to talk about that. Nick Markakis was like, he had the biggest man crush on Nick Markakis as long as he played, and even still to this day, he will bring up Nick Markakis randomly, which is always kind of funny. And I also recognize this same story that he would tell over and over again when Yoenis Cespedes was with the Mets, and he slid into second, and his diamond necklace, or I forget, it was a necklace or a bracelet, but it all went all over the field, and Chip just thought that was hilarious, and he would tell that story, it seemed like, about once a week. So it just got very tiring. But nonetheless, Chip Caray always came across to me as like a guy you might see at a party. He's not the first guy you want to go up to. You're not super excited to see Chip Caray at that party, but he's going to be nice to you. You're probably going to have a decent little 5-minute conversation to move on to someone who's a little more interesting. So again, Chip, we will, in some ways at least, we will miss you. You were a dedicated voice of the Braves for a long time. And so he is moving on to the Cardinals, and certainly wish him well. It is going to be weird as a Braves fan. I started watching the Braves in 1991, and of course, Skip and Don and Joe and Pete were all calling games that time. To me, that's kind of a golden era of Braves broadcasting, and love those guys, especially Skip. Was always my favorite, just such a funny, witty guy. But a Caray has basically been in the booth for the Braves for like 50 years. And so for the Braves to move on from the Caray name, it's kind of weird. But of course, that's what they're doing now. So they are going through, I think, the hiring process. Been a couple, they're obviously keeping it low key, but there have been a couple of stories that they're down to the top 3 finalists. The only name specifically that's been floated out there is Tom Hart. You may or may not have heard of Tom Hart. If you watch SEC football or basketball games, you do know Tom Hart pretty well. He's one of their main play-by-play guys. So it's interesting that he right now is doing more football and basketball. I watched a random SEC game the other night. I think it was Ole Miss and somebody else, and Tom Hart was doing the game. So he is a very solid announcer with a lot of experience. Not as much baseball experience, but he was the sideline guy for the Braves for a couple years, about 10 or 15 years ago. So he has been around the Braves a little bit, and in the SEC world, the Braves might find that kind of interesting. I think he is a pretty solid announcer. I don't know how that will translate to the baseball booth, but apparently there are 2 other finalists as well. So while Tom Hart's name is being thrown around a lot, we don't know who these other 2 guys are, and maybe one of them takes the job or wins the job ahead of Tom Hart. So we'll have to see on that one. All right, let's move to on the field stuff a little bit. Vaughn Grissom. Vaughn Grissom has been one of the biggest names for the Braves this offseason. If he'll be able to stick at shortstop, it's going to benefit the Braves a lot. We've talked about that a good bit. And Grissom completed his 3rd and final week-long session workout with Ron Washington, the Braves guru of infield defense. They've been working out in California, and Wash is, just kind of over the moon with what Vaughn Grissom has been able to do. So the cool thing about, this was planned. They were going to have these 3-week-long sessions out there, just very intensive sessions where Grissom hopefully is getting better and better defensively at shortstop to prepare to hopefully win the job in spring training this season. But MLB TV covered that and did a little piece on Grissom's work with Washington. And if you can find that, you can find it on MLB's website or the Braves website. It's about a 5-minute little special, and it's pretty cool to see them working. You get to hear from both of them a lot, and I always appreciate Ron Washington's point of view, especially. It's generally encouraging, and of course, you're only seeing the good from one of those pieces, but I think it still brings a little bit more comfortability from the outside, just seeing them work together like they are. It definitely reminds us that baseball season is a grind. Ron Washington says that in the piece, and that is something that I have always taken to heart. Baseball is a different kind of game. It is a game that is a marathon, not a sprint. And what that means is sometimes the most talented players can't handle the grind, right? You might be this incredibly talented player, but by game 120, you're hurt, or your play is diminished, or maybe your focus and your mental, the mental side of the game is taking a toll on you. And so it's just different in that way. It's daily, right? You don't get many off days to reset and that sort of thing. And so I think what Ron Washington is saying in the piece that I think is very true is that Grissom, he's going to have to deal with the grind mentally in taking on this task of being a shortstop for the Atlanta Braves. I think it's a huge thing, and it's bigger for him mentally than it is physically. And the encouragement to that is he has all the physical tools, and that's something that I've felt was true from the beginning. And Ron Washington is saying it in this piece that he has the physical tools to do this. Can he do it? Can he take it on mentally? I think Washington thinks he can do that as well, and he's been really encouraged by what Grissom has done. Like I've said in the past, Alex Anthopoulos has said that Grissom's intangibles are off the charts, and I think that's why the Braves are such believers in him. He's working hard, and hopefully this is all going to pay off for him and the Braves. There's no guarantees. It might be, everything might line up and look like he can do it, and he gets on the field in spring training, and it's just not going to happen. Yet that is certainly a possibility, but nonetheless, I think he's doing, and the Braves are doing everything right to get him ready for spring training, and we'll just have to see from there. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is ZiPS projections. This came out about a week and a half ago. There are a lot of different projection systems out there, and ZiPS is one of the more notable ones. Tends to be, I think, a little more accurate than some of the other projection systems. So it's always kind of interesting to see what ZiPS has to say. And one particularly encouraging thing as Braves fans is that it really likes the Braves and it likes their chances. The biggest takeaway from this whole projection of the Braves for this upcoming season is ZiPS says that the Braves have the highest floor of any of the top contenders. And that basically means that a lot would have to go wrong for the Braves not to be good this season. I mentioned this with the Mets. I think the Mets and the Braves are basically right there neck and neck if you look at WAR projections for 2023. The issue with the Mets is they have some great players, but they really are leaning on fewer really great players to be really great. And of course, with baseball, anybody can have a great season, but also anybody can have a bad season. Anybody can get hurt, and particularly when the Mets are leaning on their best two pitchers being, around 40 years old, that's a lot of risk that they're putting in. Two of their most important pieces. So the Braves have less risk because it's spread out. I mean, you can think of it kind of like, investments. You have a lot of really good investments, but you spread that out over, more things, and then your risk is lessened. And I think that's what the Braves are as a team. Alex Anthopoulos loves value, and I think he probably thinks this way, that, with so many good players, you are likely to have a very good team, even if you have a couple injuries, even if you have, one or two guys not performing the way you thought they would. And we even saw that last year, right? You had a couple guys get injured. Acuna didn't come back quite as sharp as you thought he would, and yet you have other guys step up in ways that you didn't expect, like Harris and Strider. So anyways, yeah, I think the Braves are just as good, if not better, than some of these top contending teams, but they also are very unlikely to miss the playoffs or have a really bad year simply because of how spread out their talent is. I mean, when you want to think about that, like, think about how many legitimate MVP candidates the Braves have. I think they probably have 4. And what I mean by legitimate is you can at least, within reason, see this guy having a great season and being in the MVP hunt. Okay, like Austin Riley has been, top 5 or so MVP candidate the last 2 years. Matt Olson has been a top 5 MVP candidate in recent past. That he had kind of a down season last year. Ronald Acuna, of course, if he comes back fully healthy, he's got to be one of the MVP favorites. And then Michael Harris, to me, even though it's just his second season, could I see him having a sophomore slump? Yeah, I could see that, but I could also imagine him just taking a step forward and becoming a superstar. And yeah, I could see that happening. So I think the Braves have at least 4 legitimate MVP candidates. So yeah, even if one of those guys were to get hurt or have a down season, well, another one of those guys could have a career season and just be otherworldly. And I don't think every team has 4 legitimate MVP candidates. And I'm not even considering the pitching yet. So let's turn to the pitching. Like, how many Braves could you see being Cy Young candidates? I think 2 of their 5 starters are legitimate, Fried and Strider. Of course, Fried was second in Cy Young voting last year, and Strider, if he's healthy, if he's as dominant as he was last year, and he pitches 170, 180, 190 innings, he's got to be a Cy Young favorite this season. So, and you could even talk me into some of the other guys. What if Morton comes back and is resurgent? I mean, I doubt that that's going to happen, but it's possible. What if Wright takes even another step forward from what he was last year? I could see it happening. How many Braves could be all-stars? I think 8. I think 8 legitimate candidates. I'm not saying that there will be 8 Braves be all-stars. That's that doesn't really happen very often for any team. But I mean, you think about the guys I've already mentioned, right? The 4 MVP candidates, the 2 Cy Young candidates, but you could also throw Murphy in there, right, at the catching spot. You could throw Albies in there if he has a good comeback season. You could even imagine another starter or even a reliever, like Iglesias or Minter being an all-star. So, that being said, the Braves just have a ton of talent across the board. Yeah, they have a couple of question marks and a couple holes that we've talked about. We don't know what's going to happen with shortstop and Grissom, and left field is a definite problem for the Braves. But nonetheless, man, everywhere else is really strong. So very encouraging that when you hear outside predictors, project the Braves to be this good. It's like, well, I'm not just, feeding on my own bias here. Other people think they're that good, so they must be. All right. Well, let's talk about our next topic, and that's some non-roster invitees that the Braves are bringing in to spring training. I didn't want to make this the top story for me because to me it's not all that exciting. Yet it's at least something probably worth talking about. Non-roster invitees are guys typically signed on to minor league deals or who are invited to spring training simply with a chance to make the club. And most of these guys are not going to make the team, but you have a couple that I think are at least have a reasonable shot at it. So I wanted to go at that. So the most likely of the non-roster invitees to make the team, I think, would be Jesse Chavez. And of course, Braves fans know all about Jesse Chavez, as he's been, an important piece of the Braves for the last couple seasons. Also known as the coach, Jesse Chavez was a very important part of the Braves World Series team. He came back last season on 2 separate trades to come back to the Braves, and he's just always pitched well with the Braves. He really hasn't been that good outside of Atlanta, but he comes back to Atlanta, something clicks for him. The thing about Jesse Chavez is he's getting old. He's going to be 40 years old at some point this season. So will the magic fade away, or will he be able to keep it going? That remains to be seen. The good thing about Chavez, he's a great presence in the clubhouse, in the bullpen. The Braves, I think particularly with the bullpen, really value that. Consider that, Lou Jackson's gone. Darren O'Day, another guy who's known to be a great clubhouse guy, he retired. So I think just that, if Chavez looks like he's still got a little something, I think I could see him at least breaking camp with the Braves. Maybe he doesn't, finish the whole season with the Braves, but at least making the team. I could see that happening. He also brings some versatility. He can be that mid relief guy. He can be a long relief guy. He can be an opener. He's done that a few times for the Braves. And every now and then he could even be a high leverage guy if he's pitching well. And he did that a few times last season. The guy that I think, in terms of non-roster invitees, that could have the biggest impact on the big league club this year is Kevin Pillar. So Pillar, you might remember, signed a $3 million minor league deal, which is a pretty rare type of deal. But if he makes the club, he makes $3 million. And I can see, if Rosario or Ozuna really flop this season, I think it's more likely Ozuna does. But if either or both of those guys don't play well, I think Kevin Pillar is a pretty realistic option for the Braves. Right-handed hitter, hits lefties pretty well. Is a solid, it used to be a great center field defender. Now is more just like a solid corner guy that could maybe occasionally play center field. But I think he fits into what the Braves need a little bit more than some of the other guys out there. The Braves have brought in a ton of kind of retread outfielders, and I think Pillar is maybe the best of these guys. He doesn't provide tremendous offense, but he can, he has a little pop, and he could do some things if he made the club. I could see Pillar getting an opportunity over guys like, Jordan Luplow is another guy that might end up being a fourth outfielder for the Braves. But yeah, I could see Pillar playing quite a few games for the Braves this year and having some impact. The wild card of this group, this guy was just signed to a minor league deal, is Adeiny Echeverria. He's also been with the Braves in the past. He's a shortstop, and of course the Braves needing some shortstop defense. This makes some sense. Now, Echeverria is 34 years old, so definitely getting up there, but I imagine that his glove is still really good. He's always been a very good defensive shortstop and was pretty popular when he was with the Braves in 2019 and 2020. So, if Grissom wins the job at shortstop, I could see Echeverria making the team as that really solid shortstop backup option. Obviously Orlando Arcia is still there too, but if the Braves kind of want to use him more as a pure utility guy and having Echeverria, or if Arcia were to get hurt, or if Grissom were not to work out, right, Echeverria just makes sense having that depth in the system. So I think it's at least an interesting pickup for the Braves, even if he doesn't make the team, even if he's never really hit that much. So I don't really expect him to be a huge impact offensively, but I think it's a good move nonetheless. Echeverria, by the way, I just got to mention this. He might be most famous for when he got traded from the Mets to the Braves in 2019, and he had a nice little run with the Braves, and of course the Braves won the division that season, and he gets interviewed, and he basically just says, I just want to thank God for removing me from the Mets so I could come play for the Braves. And in Braves country, there's nothing better you could say than something like that. Vaughn Grissom said something similar last year too. He basically said he thought he might get drafted by the Mets, and he was so thankful that didn't happen. So, having some Mets haters on the Braves is never a bad thing. All right, guys, well, let's keep going down the list. So the next bit of Braves news to talk about, Max Fried. Of course, Max Fried has 2 more years of control that he will definitely be playing for the Braves, but he was up for arbitration this year, and he lost his arbitration hearing to the Braves. So Fried will make $13.5 million in 2023 instead of the $15 million that he was hoping for. So if you don't know how arbitration works in MLB, basically the player says, I'm worth X number, and the team says, no, we think you're worth X number, which is usually less. And the arbiter comes in and he basically chooses one or the other, right? He's not coming in to find some middle ground number. And so basically they chose the Braves number of 13.5 million instead of Fried's number of 15 million. This is just a part of baseball. Players don't tend to, hold this against teams. It's just kind of part of the business. So I don't think this is going to affect Fried and the Braves in any way. But, the one thing I will just say with this is sometimes with arbitration, it can be an opportunity for teams to offer an extension to a player. You're right. You get to avoid arbitration and you sign a guy through X number of years beyond that. And that didn't happen. And so it's another little opportunity that has gone by the wayside for Fried to get extended with the Braves. A previous episode, this offseason, guys, I just mentioned, I continue to think it's unlikely that Fried is going to sign an extension with the Braves. I think he will enter free agency after 2024. And I would be very happy if they were able to figure out a way to get him extended. I just think this is another little sign that it might not be happening. All right, the last bit of news that I want to talk about related to the Braves is the Bally Sports bankruptcy. So Bally Sports owns the broadcasting rights to 19 separate sports networks throughout the country. The Braves, well, really you could say the Southeast, right? Bally South and Bally Southeast cover the Braves, cover the Hawks, Memphis Grizzlies, and a number of other teams. And so, but Bally has 19 of these networks. The Atlanta area is just one of those. And so they are going bankrupt, basically, their parent company. And so this could probably not have any changes to the broadcast in 2023, but it could have some pretty big changes coming beyond because we just simply don't know what's going to happen with the Braves broadcasting rights. The present system basically stinks. If you watch the Braves at all, you already know this. Baseball makes it very hard to watch your team's games, especially if you live in that area. And this is due to blackout restrictions. It's just, so for me, so I don't live in the Braves area. It makes it a little easier for me to watch games. I live in the, Washington Nationals, Baltimore Orioles sphere. And, so when the Braves play the Nationals or every now and then they play the Orioles, it's very hard for me to find those games to watch. So, but if you live in the Atlanta area, you live in Georgia, you live in the Southeast, it's much harder for you to watch Braves games if you don't have cable. And a lot of people are cutting the cord, right? Tons of people are cutting the cord. I'm one of those. But when you do that, it becomes really hard to watch your team. The purpose of the blackout, I mean, it's been in place for many, many years, but it was basically to protect cable companies. But as more people decide to cut the cord, that's when companies like Bally just start losing money hand over fist, right? Because you're expecting to make X number of dollars, and then you just don't have people watching the games on the by the numbers that you thought they would. So here we are. Bally is filing for bankruptcy here. So there's no telling where this might lead. I really hope it leads to a better game watching experience for baseball fans and baseball in general. You want baseball to be accessible to as many people who are as interested. Whether you are a hardcore fan or a casual fan, it should be easy to find the games you want to watch. So, a couple possibilities that could come of this. Another company could step in just like Bally and buy the rights, and nothing really changes. That's certainly possible, though it's hard to imagine companies seeing this current model as being a great moneymaker. MLB itself could forge a larger deal with, a streaming company like Apple or Amazon or some other streaming service, Peacock. They already have these deals in place, but they're small and they're kind of random nationally televised games. So could those streaming services create kind of a baseball, specific thing, maybe. Another thing that I've seen out there that kind of excites me more is the idea of teams setting up their own streaming services. So the Braves would have their own streaming service. They wouldn't have to go through intermediaries. And, obviously fans could pay the Braves directly to watch their games. And the best thing about this, the closer you can get to the customer, the better. But the best thing about this is you wouldn't really have any blackout restrictions anymore, right? Direct to customer, no blackout restrictions. Anyone who wants to watch the Braves, let's say they pay $20 a month and you're watching every Braves game, no matter what, no matter where you are in the world, and that would be pretty cool. So again, don't know where this is going, but it's Bally Sports is definitely going to be going bankrupt at some point during the baseball season. The only weird thing that could happen is the money that Bally is supposed to pay teams like the Braves could be held up for some time. It's hard to know if that's going to affect any operations for any teams. Hopefully not. That would be kind of bad in the middle of the season, but I don't think that that's likely. All right, guys. Well, hey, look, pitchers and catchers are going to be reporting soon. February 13th is the earliest that pitchers and catchers will be reporting. So just another reminder that even though we're still in the middle of winter, baseball is coming. It is soon. If you can get down to Florida and see some spring training games, that would be sweet. I doubt I'll be able to do that, but it would definitely be, it's definitely on my list of things to do one day. My buddy David and I are talking about maybe doing it. So David, if you're listening, we still got to figure that out. You should, I'm going to put you on it, but you can let me know when we're going to be doing that. So, all right, guys. Well, again, I really appreciate you listening and watching, and I will see you and talk to you very soon.